My name is Benjamin Wong. I'm an artist, I'm an activist, and I create large-scale objects of curiosity that look something like this. The purpose behind my work is to get people to wonder, what am I looking at? Because that initial spark of curiosity brings us down the rabbit hole of a conversation. And if there's one thing we really need more of, is more dialogue with people around topics that we don't really know about. And so when someone says, wait, this looks like AI, what is it? Tell me a little bit more. I just say, oh, this is a photograph of an art installation that I built. I built this inside of a mall, all the way in Vietnam. This is really wonky clicker. Nope, that's not playing. Okay, that's supposed to be a video. I built this all the way in a mall in Vietnam over the course of a couple weeks with the help of dozens of volunteers who came together. And each of the lines that you see that make up this art installation, well, those are straws. Single-use plastic straws, 168,000 of them in fact, that we collected, cleaned, and organized over the last 9 months in order to create the International Market Art installation. Now, these projects don't happen alone. They happen with support of brands, communities, people. Those are my parents over there who keep swung by to help out. And I think there's something really amazing about the power of art to bring people together, to make boring topics a little bit more interesting. Of course, you guys have all heard about biochar. One of the things that I've been hoping to do these days is not just focusing on problems, but also looking at solutions. Biochar is responsible, I think, maybe someone can fact check me, for 89% of verified carbon removal credits. And yet so few people know what it is. And I thought, why not take this material, convert it into something that was impossible to ignore? So biochar is created through a process of pyrolysis, going from fire, almost like you put toast in a toaster oven for too long. And that bait not only sucked carbon out of the air, but relit the soil. To me, that reminds me of maybe something like a phoenix. And so we ended up creating this out of bamboo biochar, 6 meters tall, made from 4 tons of carbon. It's the carbon footprint of the average person every single year. If you're American, it's about 3 times more. If you fly, probably 10 times more. When people look at art, I think they always look at the final result. They say, oh, is this beautiful? Over here, this is a project that I created with my nephew looking at it, to talk about the carbon footprint, the enormous carbon footprint of Bitcoin mining. We wanted to create a symbol of that. But for me, what makes a successful art project isn't just creating the art, but rather how the art gets utilized after the fact. And so seeing this getting used on the cover of a report with Greenpeace, converted into merchandise, we did remakes like other artists, so they can project on the side of a building during Climate Week last year. Like, to me, that's the power of art, to communicate things, to make things more approachable, to make things more fun. You know, I didn't always used to be an artist, nor did I used to be an activist. Actually, I started off as a hard rock mining engineer. That's me over there. Life was a lot more boring at the time, and this is my pre-art life. And that boredom actually got converted into picking up a camera on evenings and weekends. And when you are trying to survive as an artist, one of the most important things you learn how to do is to attract attention. Because if no one knows that you exist, no one's ever going to work with you, and you can't earn money, you can't survive. And I think that same lesson applies for anyone who's working in a climate department, right? You want people to pay attention. And so initially, for me, what that meant was doing all sorts of weird stunts. It's how I found myself tying a model 30 meters underwater in a shipwreck in Bali, just taking photos for the fun of it. And I was like, oh, people care about this stuff, because you're making it easy to have a conversation about it. From there, I slowly started getting work, eventually getting hired by companies, do all sorts of weird stunts, like creating an angel with wings of fire using fire painting, or dangling people off the edge of a 40-story skyscraper in the Philippines for Nike to show that they could do it. And very, very soon after doing these projects, it became really clear that just doing projects to get popular, to get likes, to get views, like, oh, that was like missing something. And so I know there are a bunch of newbies in the room who we want to get involved in climate. Maybe you don't know how. That was exactly where I was somewhere back in 2016. And it turns out that all you need to do when you are trying to figure out how to make a difference in the world is to start trying, because you never know where you're going to end up. At the time, for me, the topic that was the most hyped up in 2015, 2016 was the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. We just discovered with all these new statistics coming up that there was going to be more plastic than fish in the sea by 2050. And so I ended up trying to convert this idea of how do I generate attention for different causes by doing stunts and integrating that into my work. And through the process of creating these art projects, like putting a mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles, I would learn about all the different statistics that came with the problem set. And as my art form evolved, I started off doing photography. I started realizing, well, these days, maybe everyone starts to have a cell phone of their own. Maybe it's more about creating physical art installations so that everyone with a cell phone can come and take photos themselves so they can communicate things out in the world. And over time, as that topic expanded beyond just plastics, we start tackling issues like overconsumption, creating the world's tallest closet, with the Nexus summits all the way in Cairo to highlight how many clothes a single person might wear over the course of their lifetime. We started collaborating with brands. This one was to talk about how we needed to use passive technologies to power future devices with Dell, the largest electronic voice recycler in the world. And this was just created a couple months ago on the Highline with Kiehl's. We wanted to talk about how we needed to move away from single-use plastics into more refillable solutions in order to tackle the problem. Now, one of the things that I have found challenging in my career as an artist is the purpose of my work is supposed to be to change hearts and minds so that behavior changes, right? So once in a while, you need to look at the data and you need to say, is it working? In the case of plastics, this is kind of what the graph of plastic production looks like. It's kind of depressing. And over here, maybe we discovered that the turtle had a straw up its nose and we didn't like that. But that didn't stop plastic production. So awareness doesn't always equal change. And actually, if you start, I had a video there. If you start projecting it out 2050, like that number actually 3x, it gets even worse. And so what do you do when you start facing the data and you start questioning, like, how can I adapt my work? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm an artist. I'm not going to come up with some tech solution, right? And so that question of, like, who do I need to reach with my work led me eventually to Nairobi, Kenya, where I worked with over 300 ladies collecting 3 tons of plastics from the slums of Kibera. I managed to successfully fundraise some money to go there, all with the hope of creating an art installation. But I didn't have permission yet. But somehow, 5 p.m. on a Friday night, I got permission to build an art installation at 8 a.m. at the headquarters of the United Nations. This is a 4-story tall giant plastic tap. And the reason I wanted to build this was because 1,500 delegates from 193 different countries were going to be coming together to sign into place a global plastic treaty. And this was the art installation that they had to walk past every single day as we were deciding whether or not this was a necessary thing. Now, I can't say that my art actually made a difference in it. I think the treaty would have happened no matter what. But what I do know is that at the end of the day, this became the one thing that everyone could agree upon. Whether you're a for-profit, non-profit, government organization or not, you were using this to communicate out how important this treaty was and why it was necessary. And at the end of the day, a couple years later, the United Nations ended up using it on the cover of their plastics report to talk about how important it was to turn off the plastic tap. They never paid me, by the way. That's not Now, this whole thing actually brought like one big question up in my mind that I've been trying to resolve. It's like, why are there not more environmental monuments? Monuments are something that we use in order to commemorate a really important event or moment in time, or commitments that we're making. And there are so many climate commitments, and yet there are so few monuments to remind us of why those are necessary. When I think of the most famous monument of them all, I think perhaps of the Statue of Liberty, freedom and democracy for all. And because we've taken the time to compress something complex into something simple, it means that it can be replicated anywhere in the world. It means that as the times change, our definitions of freedom and democracy for all that might not have included women or people of color need to be updated. It means that when we stray far from our ideals, the ideals that we hold so dear, and people want to speak up, they can leverage that symbol to speak up so that within a couple seconds, you can understand what's at stake. And I think of things like the Clean Water Act was recently repealed, and I wonder, how would that conversation have gone if there was a monument that was commemorating it? You know, something like the Statue of Liberty, you're like, there must have been a lot of people that wanted to fund this thing. Like, who was asking for it? Well, it turns out no one was asking for it. Frederick Bartoli, the guy who made the Statue of Liberty, the sculptor, spent 23 years trying to raise funds in order to build this thing. He actually made miniature versions of this where he was trying to attract people and would raise like 25 cents a pop, one photo at a time. He didn't even know how to build this. So the engineer that came on board only came on 3 years before it was finally completed. And even after it was completed, it sat in boxes here in the New York Harbor for over a year because they hadn't raised enough funds to build a pedestal for the Statue of Liberty could sit upon. And I think this doesn't mean that the work isn't important. So sometimes you might find yourself in rooms where no one is asking for what you're able to deliver, but you need to find ways of thinking about how to get involved anyways. For me, what that looks like is thinking about conferences and places where important events are happening, like the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, which is happening next month. We got 196 countries unveiling plans on how they're going to protect 30% of nature by 2030. And I'm like, why is there no symbol there? And I somehow managed to swindle my way to build an art installation in the Blue Zone. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. flight. And the idea is to build this giant 2-meter tall biodiversity figure where each and every block represents a unique and different ecosystem. Because there is a world, carbon is important, but there is a world in which we solve all our carbon problems and the world still dies. And I think that there's something interesting about having something that we capture the essence of what it means to live on this planet. And in conclusion, I'm out of time. I think that when I look back on my career and the work that I do, I've done all these weird and interesting things that no one was really asking for. And all it took to bring these projects to life was a small group of rebels and believers who wanted to try something new that they didn't think was possible. Oh, someone just decided to end my presentation. All right. Well, the ending quote is the Margaret Mead quote that we all probably know. Because at the end of the day, in order to build these projects, to build these ideas, to come up with things that have never yet been done before, which is where we need to go, it's always going to be done with a small little group of people who are thoughtful and committed to a cause. And yes, that's I'll just end it.